Thank you, sir. So welcome to this week's TOC. So I've got a few bits on the agenda, the standing reviewing actions from last week and reviewing the outstanding PRs. Stephan, you put forward the RFC for role change process as something for us to have a look at. I thought it was appropriate to put election updates on here, Chris, and any other business. Now, I was wondering if we were going to have a working group update, but I do see that Greg is here. So I'm guessing, yes, we may have a working group update this week.
I am here. I can give an update.
Cool. All right. I can slot that in without any problem whatsoever. So I'll just put a WG update for now, and I will fix that later on. Okay, so in terms of reviewing actions from last week, Chris, you had a PR to close from LF Legal.
I think I did that.
Okay.
I did that.
You did that?
Awesome. I did that.
Okay, cool. And well, Stephan, you updated yours, so I guess we're going to get onto that one in a little bit then, or would you like to do it now?
We can do it later, no problem.
Okay, cool. So that update is done then in that case. And then how did everything go with creating the PR about SBOMs, David?
I didn't say I was going to create a PR about SBOMs. From my memory, I said I was going to ask the vulnerability working group whether they were interested in taking this problem on, and Paul said no to that, which we can push back on, or we can say no to. I think he said he's an interested party and he'd love to join a conversation and give his input on all kinds of security practices that he thinks are good. They don't think that it's their job to enforce security standards or create security standards. And I'm like, I guess so. I don't know whose job it is exactly, right? We have one working group that's the closest to security, and they're like, we don't actually think it's our job to do security. So there's, I know you are. I can tell, honey. I can hear you. And so I think the question is, do we want to make them do it? Or do we want to create an independent body to do it? Those would sort of be the two options that make the most sense to me. I would love to be involved in an independent body that does it. So like we can go ahead with that plan where Paul and I and one or two other people who are interested create a periodic conversation to begin to make progress on a proposal there. I do think it's going to be not trivial. I think it like both deciding what actually makes sense and then figuring out how to roll it out and figuring out how to create milestones that are somewhat reasonable and stagger our compliance and strategically invest carefully. This is not trivial. No. So I could go ahead with that plan if the group wants me to. I think it's easier to have a working group own a thing than it is to create a virtual independent body that then has to remember that it exists and do its job periodically. So what do you folks think?
I mean, would this deserve a new working group that would be focused on this? Well, that's maybe one option that we could consider. I mean, it sounds like we might just need to start getting some sort of proposal together before we decide to figure out where this fits in the organization or who should be responsible for this.
The problem is, Eric, there's like a whole bunch of cross-cutting engineering concerns, right? From like, how do you set up like shared infrastructure to how do you do code quality standards across, like you could build a group that like, you're like, oh, this is security standards across all the things. And it's like, well, what about everything else that's across all the things as well, right? Do they own standardization of coding? Do they own standardization of infrastructure? What's the boundaries of that group, right?
Yeah, it is a fairly big one. Yeah, because
it overall sounds like even in the long run, this is something that should be cross working groups somehow. right? I mean, in the beginning, that's going to be defining those standards, but like if we want to evolve on that, then it's all about common decisions because they will affect the code from everyone, and that means it affects the whole working groups. So maybe it even makes sense to not force that on the vulnerability working group. Besides, we don't want to force anything on anyone, but actually to have a kind of virtual working group that is long-standing, and every working group should send somebody in there as a representative. And that's maybe even a longer running thing. Like I can imagine that those working groups might not have a need for a weekly meeting in the long run, right? But it should still be organized in a way where it's clear where to get commitment from everyone and how to get commitment from everyone. If like, just imagine we start with, yeah, let's go the basic SLSA level or whatever. And at some point in time, the question comes up, should we approach the next level? Then this is something that needs commitment from all working groups. Because it is a non-trivial amount of work, I'm sure.
Another option is that we are that working group, right? I mean, I was like, what's a virtual working group that handles technical concerns, but is across all the working groups? We should invent such a working group structure. And I'm like, wait a minute.
You can call it the Committee of Technical Oversight.
Yeah, but I view our role as like, you know, if there are those specific efforts to invest in, then we want to actually identify that as a particular structure, rather than saying like, oh, it's all in the kernel here.
Yeah, I see. So like our job is to identify that we need a pattern for like, CI spending across all the working groups, but then not do it, not execute it, or like maybe I execute it, but like that's me taking ownership of a thing, not the committee owning it or the council owning it, whatever.
I mean, and it is likely that this could be something where it's clear that the TOC will actually spend the lead for such a working group, right? But it's also clear that it does need involvement from everyone. And I think not in every TOC meeting, all working groups are represented, and that would need a structure where they are actually agreeing on something. I mean, on the other hand side, we could, as a TOC, enforce it, right? We could just state all working groups have to comply to SLSA entry level. Here's how we would propose to do it. If you want to deviate from that, you're free to do it, but we are the technical oversight committee. We decided that we need to comply to that entry level of SLSA. If you want to do it in a different way, go on, do it. Maybe we don't enforce these details, but that we need this kind of thing is a decision that we as a TOC take. That's maybe fair, actually. As a matter of fact, if you, David, are going to participate in that, we have that fulfilled already, no matter if we say this is, we need to be involved there or not, we are, right?
Yeah, I like the idea of us deciding a desired target level. Like it does seem like a decision, but I don't think we are informed enough about the consequences of that to make that decision very effectively. What we actually need is feedback. We need to propose a desired SLSA level and then get feedback from working group leads about how difficult that would be to achieve and so on, how close we are.
Start with SLSA level 1.
Yeah, I would definitely start with the lowest that's available. I mean, maybe it's worth actually reading upon what would the rest mean, what would be required, and we might even come up with saying to the working groups, we need to reach I think they have 4 levels. Like, let's say we need to reach level 3 at the minimum, because otherwise we have a problem. And the feedback we want to receive is not, is that possible, but how much will it take? Like, for how long you will not be able to do anything else but reach that SLSA level, and then we can still decide. But maybe there's even no chance, like depending on if we want, for example, Cloud.gov to still use Cloud Foundry. And I guess we want them to still use it.
Yeah, so we
might
input.
have no chance.
Right, so we need customer input, consumer input about like what SLSA levels mean for them. And we need working group input in terms of level of effort. That all seems like reasonable. I mean, my goal, I guess, would be to roll out the minimum level of SLSA that actually gives us a real advantage that we get to market. And like more security conscious customers like Cloud.gov feel like they can continue to use Cloud Foundry norms on. I don't know. Is that's also level 1? Does anybody, does anybody have a hint about what level that might be? So we can start this like.
Level 1 is documentation of the build process.
I like it. I think we could pretty clearly get there because we already do that.
Provenance needs to be available. Provenance needs to be available. So.
Like 2 is temper resistance of the build service. That's like an example they state there is hosted source build and signed provenance. That might already be getting difficult to
authenticated and service generated provenance. So so we need something in Concourse to generate the provenance data, I guess.
Yeah, that's nice. I feel like what we then are starting to create a proposal for is level 1 minimum compliance, level 2 desired compliance, right? Be like, if you're there and it's relatively easy, but we haven't done anything to support level 2, like we don't have the authenticated system to receive and store and potentially sign that. So I don't know. It sounds like maybe that's the decision from the TOC, but we would want to flesh out more what it means before we really go ahead. We would want working group input on how disruptive is it to achieve level 1 minimum compliance, right? Is there like standard formats for this provenance data, Ruben? You and I were looking at that briefly. Like,
yeah,
can a working group do this?
They expect in toto or something. That's what they recommend. I haven't looked into what.
Okay.
But I mean, like I can probably like if you would extend Bosch releases to have some more metadata and then generate provenance data based on that in using that in toto thing, then you are probably close to SLSA 2, given that we already use Git and GitHub, and everybody uses scripted builds and the build service, which is Concourse, right? So it's mostly about the provenance data.
And also finalization, right? Like Bosch already has a final YAML, right? Or private YAML. You could put a private key in there and Bosch could literally sign during the finalization. Like Bosch could sign it. And because gives you public private key cryptography, right? You don't actually have to have like the build system even do it. Although most of the time finalization happens on the build system anyway. It seems like a handful of small Bosch features could make what we're talking about in terms of provenance data, signed provenance data even a thing. And then it is available, could be GitHub. Like as in it's checked in as part of releases subdirectory of Bosch.
Yeah, that and things like SigStore and others that are out there are things that are candidates for doing it. There's lots of integrations, right? There's even like this Git sign that would it would probably get in conflict with the pair programming mode. That might still be done somewhere because that's probably not possible unless you find like I got a response to that while I responded on Twitter to Bret about it, which is like, yeah, if you find an OIDC controller that would kind of allow 2 people to log in and then do some signing, maybe, but otherwise probably not. But even like getting into something where we actually have signed commits, there is infrastructure out there that is probably worthwhile looking at least before we create something Bosch specific. But I guess if that's changing like the amount of work, then doing it Bosch specific would also be okay, I guess.
Well, we had also been wondering about what levels of SLSA compliance or other system compliance are required. I see Bret just dropped in. Not to put you on the spot, Bret, but do you have any shorthand for that in terms of like what Cloud.gov's requirements are in terms of supply chain security as you're looking for?
Not offhand. I know we have some executive orders on this, but I haven't looked into them directly. I'm looking on the call to see if Peter's here. He's not.
Yeah, he dropped in last week and started this conversation for us.
Yeah, he's on my team. So he would be the expert. But if you want, we can go back and see kind of what the executive order says, and that'll probably tell you what's going on. He seemed to think the SLSA framework was pretty good for this stuff. The stuff.
Right,
Yeah,
but,
we'd
there's
even
lots of
wondering about the
levels.
levels, but yeah, we might need his input on that then. So it sounds like, you know, what we've been talking about, we've been looking into a bunch of the details here. This probably deserves at least maybe even a draft RFC to try to get all this in paper, you know, on paper, and to decide on what might, you know, the new process and new development would be to support this. Because I don't think we're going to resolve it, you know, by 8:30 Pacific today.
I mean, doing it for Bosch releases would like give us quite a lot, I guess, because basically everything in our ecosystem is standardized on that. The other thing would be the stem cell, right? And that's a really big chunk of work because we cannot reuse anything we do for the Bosch releases there.
But it sounds like there's a proposal, Ruben, to kind of isolate this to the Bosch world. Like the first step we're talking about is ideally the stem cell and definitely the Bosch release creation process generate provenance data. Those seem like reasonable Bosch features. And so we have to think about like how much work are they? When can we prioritize them? But like that seems like a good proposal to put in the RFC, which is like we are going to roll out SLSA compliance via some Bosch features that the scope will be Bosch releases, maybe the stem cell. We have another proposal to do cloud native build packs to get build pack related SBOM generation, which I think is a reasonable idea, but we don't have a strategy for getting cloud native build packs into Cloud Foundry yet. So that's an option. Of course, you could also put SBOM generation in the old build packs too. There's no proposal on that at all yet. But I think what the RFC might look like is a target SLSA compliance level, a minimum and a desired maybe SLSA compliance level, and kind of an indication of some of the things we would have to do, the infrastructure that we have to provide in order to allow teams to be able to achieve that compliance, such as these Bosch release features that we're just talking about.
And I mean, in terms of stem cells, there's tools like Zift and others that can actually just scan it and create SBOM information, right?
SBOM
It should be possible.
SBOM is not provenance data.
Oh, okay. You mean like
So,
where is it coming from?
Yes, it's like like signed that you have to observe where you're downloading it from, and then like that needs to be signed by an independent thing like the build system, like for the higher SLSA levels.
Mm-hmm.
SBOM
Peter,
is basically just like for maybe SLSA level 1 or something.
Since we made Peter jump on, we got to ask him. We want to know how much the different SLSA levels matter to a customer like Cloud.gov of Cloud Foundry. Like if we're considering SLSA 1 versus 2, I don't think we're considering anything much more than that. How much does it make a difference?
I haven't looked at the SLSA levels in depth for a few weeks. I think SLSA level 1 would make a huge difference in talking to potentially customers potentially sketchy about open source, because it shows that, hey, you've thought about it, you've adopted a framework.
Right. Okay. So like it shows intentionality towards the like desire to think about this problem and the generation of provenance data so that you kind of have a base for where things are coming from.
So that just needs to be available, right? So there you could use scanner tools to like retroactively generate an SBOM or something.
Isn't it provenance was available, Ruben?
All right, but it doesn't have to be authenticated or service generated.
Sure, but provenance should be where it's coming from. But I agree, we could do it one time or something. It could be done manually. Okay, great. Thanks, Peter. That's great feedback. I think we will create a RFC that sets a desired SLSA level and a minimum SLSA level, and we'll find out. It's probably going to be a minimum level of 1, but we won't approve that until we get working group feedback on how hard that's going to be and how reasonable it is to assume. There'll probably be a set of repos that are in scope and maybe a set of repos that are not in scope too. there may be some stuff that's long enough tail and on the periphery where we're like, it's not actually worth making sure that it happens, but it is worth, like every repo in CF deployment, right? Seems like should be in scope, for example.
Okay, cool. Who are we putting down for drafting the RFC then? David, you seem pretty keen.
Good point. Good point. I think my problem is that I can really only do one RFC at a time, and I want to do the one that's about. I am keen on this, but I also want to do the one that's about our CI infrastructure, like our like, because I was involved in the allocation and budgeting of it in the first place, and so, and it's also, I love hyperscalers infrastructure stuff. So I don't think I should actually do both. I have some input on it. Ruben's been thinking about it with me on the VMware side. Ruben does lots of stuff for us, so I don't want to volunteer him for it, but I think if a lot of it's in the Bosch area, Ruben would be a good fit. If there's a TOC member who is interested in this topic that could also be officially sponsoring it and involved, that would be nice.
Do we have like a
There's no
cricket sound
volunteers.
effect?
Okay, well, let's see. I mean, I think we can delay this a little bit too, alternatively. But because maybe the folks who would be working on it just don't actually have a ton of time to work on it right now. I think if Cloud.gov, if anybody, community member wants to help with on the proposing of it too, or like, there's opportunity to get involved, or lead a group that meets periodically and makes progress, or creates a draft RFC and starts discussing it.
Yeah, I'll toss that out there. Bret will attest that I'm already overcommitted. But who isn't?
Yeah, I think for us, part of it is just understanding what the timelines are for us on SBOM and trying to figure out, what's possible and what time frame for what level of requirement. So we'll take a look on our side what's pressing us forward and see if we can prioritize some work on this.
And sorry I'm late, but back to the SBOM question. I hope other people would sort of appreciate the functionality within the Bosch ecosystem of being able to better interrogate what you're running on your Bosch nodes. Unless everyone here has a method for knowing exactly what is in every release on every node and hasn't shared with us how that's done.
It is possible.
Not even
currently
exactly
with Bosch, right? A stem cell contains a packages.list thing file, and a Bosch release contains all the things that are installed, right? So you don't know where the blobs came from that are in the Bosch release. That's like the missing provenance data. But apart from that, it's not that we haven't. There is already a lot of it available. So
I didn't know if there were any community available tools that made interrogating down through the Bosch releases into the packages. So I guess that's the missing piece.
Yeah, but we're right. For bombs, it's relatively easy, right? The hard part is provenance. The hard part is knowing where this stuff came from. Right? Like VMware's we got all these security scanners that we can run on releases. So like us figuring out, and plus, SIFT and right, like these are not terribly difficult problems to go figure out retroactively what's in the thing. The hard part is you can't retroactively figure out where it came from.
Yeah, what we do is we have what we call an internal bill of material based on the Bosch releases and the versions. We just need it already for the shipment, and then we have the typical scanner tools running on top of that to find security vulnerabilities. But that's also looking from above on the stuff, and then you get funny results and funny evaluations. I don't want to talk about too much. I don't see so much value in these tools, and they are painful as hell. But there are some product standards and requirements, so we do that.
So again, from the Cloud.gov side, I'll say that even if you don't have provenance, even if you don't have scanning, the actual just list is hugely helpful. You know, to give you an idea what happens in the government, something major pops like log4j, and then everybody goes on a weeks-long hunt to figure out every single place that log4j can possibly exist in every single package or thing they're running, you know, at a deep level they've never really interacted before. So think of it in those terms. It's you know, some vulnerability comes up and you want to know like which systems have this thing in it, and therefore, you know, where should we direct attention to resolving it? Right now, the amount of labor and effort and time taken to just identify that is quite enormous, especially as things speed up and we get more and more of these things. So this is kind of, you know, if you think of it from that perspective of, you know, you're the Center for Internet Security in the US, and, you know, you've identified a major threat, and now you're trying to identify for every government agency, every system they run, every public infrastructure, you know, company, who's got it. And so that's the thing they're trying to tackle first. And I think more even than provenance is just knowing what's in there in the first place. That would be a huge step in and of itself.
Cool. Well, we've burned a bunch of time on this subject, and we don't have anybody so far taking the lead on it. So we'll probably have to wait a few weeks till there's like bandwidth available for, you know, leads, unless somebody from outside of this council wants to own this problem for the time being.
Thank you for considering it. I mean, I really appreciate that everybody's taking the time to, you know, put this front and center.
Yep. Just like on the VMware side, we care about it. We're solving all these problems for our stuff, which then contains Cloud Foundry stuff. So if this was available, this would save us time too. So like, it's not entirely like selfless, right? If we could get this available, we get to leverage it. Now, if it's available in a format that we don't like or something, now we've got like incompatibilities, which sounds like a thing that we should be able to solve on our side. So it would be advantageous to us if this existed.
Yeah, I think it's good to get out ahead of it. And that's certainly what we're finding on the government side is like, well, there will be some vendor or some system and you know, they're comparing Cloud.gov to others. And they're like, well, that one can produce an SBOM for us right away. And we ask you for one and you have to manually generate it. So that is of itself is used as an indicator to understand, you know, how well controlled is your ecosystem. But yeah, I think everybody's going to need to do this eventually. And it's just a matter of time. And so getting ahead of it and doing it well is a good thing to do.
Okay, cool. I'm going to suggest that we do a little bit of cherry picking of PRs to review of ones that are fresh / kind of pressing on here due to time that we've got. So we've got a few new ones, and I will just do a quick screen share. That's the one I want. Okay, cool. So we've got sync org Cloud Foundry with reality as a new one, which I've just ticked on there, which is a GitHub action. So should be good to go on that one, Ruben, without any worries whatsoever.
I wouldn't merge this as in, no, because it probably will revert. Like this requires like manual review because apparently the sync hasn't run for a while. There's issues, like there were some missing people. So the problem is that there were people not members, and then they were in like some groups, and then the whole thing breaks.
Okay.
So it hasn't run successful. So now we have a diff again. So we need to figure out, like, ideally we get to a state where it goes through again. But this will, if we would merge this, we'll probably revert a bunch of stuff that has been merged since, right? So we want it in a different state. But this helps to debug, right? You can see sometimes it breaks on settings on a repo or something, and this helps with debugging. So.
Okay, cool. All right. We will. That one. Okay, cool. So then
currently, I think it's broken on people needing to accept invites.
Yeah,
so that's apparently a thing. So if people get added to the org, then they need to accept the invite, and then they can be added to a team. And currently it breaks because it cannot add people to a team because they aren't in the org yet, but they have been invited. So that's also quite annoying, but yeah.
Yeah. So a little bit, yeah, a bit irritating and a bit chicken and egg, that one.
Yeah, finicky.
So then we've got a pretty small one here from Chris, just to add in the new repo for Karifi. So no worries on that one, I don't think.
Cool.
It exists already, so that's all good. Okay. I'm going to skip that one for the moment. And election.
So I mean, well, wait, if that's creating a new repo, like who should own that? Is that being administered by you and Ram, Chris? Because it's a website.
That won't be under a working group. That's a website. It's a.
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay.
at some point we should canonize like what these other repositories that are TOC or CFF or admin that should probably be established, but we haven't done that yet. But for right now, that won't be owned by a working group.
Should we have a CFF working group?
Probably. So yeah, I mean, that would make sense. Just so, you know, within the community repo, all those repositories are actually assigned to some entity. So that probably makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, we carved out like an administrative repo class in the repository ownership RFC. So getting a definitive list of those, I think, would help.
And once we have that, the orphaned list whittled down, we're down to like, including all the CFF admin ones, there's only about 30 or so repositories total now. So that's down from 150 or something. So most of that work has happened. So, but we'll have to do another revision of that. There's a few like edge cases that we'll go through, but we'll get to that maybe in June.
Okay, cool. So now we've got enable stalebot for recently inherited repos. I don't think there's anything for us to do on this one at TOC level, is there, Ruben?
Yes, that just needs to happen. We still have a stalebot that's not, the stalebot thing still needs to be merged into the community, but we don't have that. But we got like a bunch of these new repos, and we would like to enable a stalebot because there's a bunch of issues that are probably stale and we don't want to close them manually. And the stalebot automation works by that particular team. Just look for that team and an admin role.
Okay, cool. I'm going to skip over that one for the moment. That's working group and election docs, which I'll skip over again for the moment because that's another item on there. Have we still got Norm on the call, or has he dropped off?
I don't see him.
Okay, I was hoping we might be able to get an update on Stratos. Okay, cool. So on the common stalebot, do we need to do anything to push that one forward? Because I'm seeing the last activity was the 8th of April.
Yeah, I need to have time. So if you can like make it so that I need less sleep in the day.
Okay. I'm working on those 32-hour days, but I just haven't got there yet.
Okay, but that would help. Yeah, no. So this is not my top priority. This is something I know that needs to happen, but yeah.
Yep. Okay, cool. Are there any other PRs that anyone wants to flag up at this moment?
In that review column, the last one, I need someone to approve that one is in preparation for service fabric transfer out of the incubator.
Right, and thank you for staying on that, Marcela. It's been lingering for a while.
Yes.
And yeah, whenever you're ready, we can. I guess are they going to be ready to make the transfer?
I need this to be merged first.
Yeah.
So people don't lose access.
You had some questions about Travis CI. I don't know if anyone else here like GitHub does a very good job of URL forwarding, but does anyone know in particular transfer repository if Travis CI gets messed up? Question about that. Okay. I mean, I think we'll just transfer stuff over. If it breaks some pipelines, they can correct that on their end. Like, you know.
Exactly.
Okay, cool. Well, I'm happy to approve that one. So that's all good.
Thanks.
Right. No problem at all. Okay. So then we are the RFC for the role change process, which I'm going to paste in chat. Okay, Stephan. Over to you.
So as we discussed last TOC meeting, I added the proposal in this direction that we have an explicit contributors YAML file, which lists all contributors. And I modified the text. So that is a fast and easy thing. You can just read through it, and then we could probably continue with this PR. The longer thing comes, well, if we would merge that and accept that, the question is, how do we get then an automation ready? Because probably we don't want to maintain this contributors file in parallel to the Cloud Foundry YAML. That doesn't work as of today. Not really good, but then it becomes even worse. And that's why I tried a little bit to have let's say, a Python script that reads in this contributors YAML. It would read in the Cloud Foundry YAML with an empty org member array. And it reads in all the working groups, scrapes out this YAML file, and then generates the org members, then the set of contributors plus every user that is listed in one of the working groups, including the TOC. And that one is then brought in and is a resulting Cloud Foundry YAML, and that one would then need to be passed over to this tool that updates in the Cloud Foundry YAML. And that's something I don't have a PR with this script yet, because it relies on this PR to be merged. Otherwise, it doesn't make so much sense. But I want to discuss whether this is a right way to continue, and then maybe I could meet with Ruben just to bring that into reality, if that works. I could. There's not. I could show the script, but it's not much. It's a Python script that just reads several files from the community repository and then calculates the resulting cloudfoundry.org, which would then not be anymore in the repository. The cloudfoundry.yaml in the repository would be the static part. So eventually it would just contain the overall org configuration, the list of repositories, but in a distant future, it would not contain anymore the org members and not contain anymore the regular teams, maybe some special teams, but not anymore the standard workgroup teams, because that is then also easy to generate. And then I would start with the org members and see if this is running well. And then the next step would be to generate maybe these workgroup teams in addition. And then we could, let's say, concentrate on the spicy RFC that Greg has open to get rid of all the other teams. Don't know how long it takes, but that could be a roadmap that is not too disruptive.
I mean, to me, this sounds like the direction that we want to go into in terms of having a minimal declared state for all the official sources of governance and participation. So and that kind of generation from the smaller and more defined set of inputs sounds great to me.
Hopefully that also reduces the amount of maintenance that we have to do currently to correct all the errors in the big non-generated file.
Yeah, it wouldn't solve the problem with that we have to invite new team member org members first. That it is just how this Cloud Foundry.yaml file is generated. So if we agree on this process, then I could file an additional PR that proposes a script. Needs a little bit of polishing here and there, maybe some tests even, and then we can go.
Tests.
Actually, that whole problem of people not being part of the org yet, that goes away if we actually start using our RFCs, right? Because people would first be a contributor and then they are added as a member, right? And then
That's true. Yeah.
A while later, they will be added to the team. Currently, we shortcut that a lot, and that's why these issues.
I think at the moment that's because of the transition from one model to a new model, and it's just that teething pain at the moment. But
yeah, my idea was to accelerate it a little bit because we are now 1 year with this
yes,
and it is not too complex, right? It's something that can be done. And
no, I think the main problem is the like who should own it, right? Like I've been driving a bit of that, and I'm starting to be a bottleneck. So yeah, would be.
Yeah. Okay. So the script would be in the community repository, so it would. By definition,
I hope
the
that,
TOC,
right? That's why I put all the stuff in the
no, I
community
got it.
repo, and then like nobody started owning it. So
okay,
I don't know.
So I got no my mistake.
So, I mean, it sounds like reopening the final comment period on this and creating a linked PR for the suitable script. And I'm going to suggest some documentation as part of it to enable other people to pick these things up is a good thing to do. Does that sound like a reasonable way of moving this one forwards?
I guess so, yeah.
Okay.
I'm willing to provide a first PR with a script and also some documentation maybe, and then we go from there and see what is missing. I'm not so sure about the integration with the two GitHub Actions. I mean, the technical part can be done, but I think if we enable it, then it's working. And there's no escape anymore. And I don't know if we can have GitHub Actions only on PRs, etc. But maybe we just go through it.
Okay.
Yeah, we can pair on that if you want.
I will start with a PR and then ping you, and then we can.
Okay, cool. All right, so I've just noted that as an action in there, so that's all okay. So election updates, Chris.
Yeah, so we are just about ready to get underway with the 2022 TOC election. And I guess first and foremost, there's pull request 259. This adds docs to the community repo that I can point to. So the dates I've got proposed here is May 18th, that's tomorrow. We announce the election. And then a candidate nomination period runs from May 18th to June 2nd. Then on June 2nd, the election begins. We'll close the nomination period and we'll send out email ballots and people can vote up till June 17th. The election will then close, and on June 22nd, after the weekend, we'll announce the results, and the new TOC would begin the following Tuesday. Eric has suggested we use a different voting process, electo, over what we did last year. I support that. We need to do some testing of that and maybe run a mock election just so we know what we're doing before we actually start the official election. I do think that, yeah, so Eric, if you wanted to update this pull request or put in another one to update the election format, that would be great. However, I also think that doesn't have to happen before tomorrow, but we do need to get this merged before I send out the initial kickoff communication to CF Dev tomorrow. I'll do that after the board meeting, which is 11 a.m. So tomorrow afternoon, I'll put out the initial information and kick off the nomination period. And nominations are just done using GitHub issues to the community repo. So yeah, so if we can get this merged, I think it looks good to go with the exception of the way the election is run. But again, I think that doesn't need to be updated until we actually start the election.
Yeah, that makes sense. Chris, maybe we can schedule some time a little bit later this week just to play around with Electro and get the admin stuff set up. Yeah, I know Dawn Foster, I had asked her about this and she had also volunteered some of her time to help us just work out the configuration. But honestly, it doesn't look that complicated to me.
Okay, cool. Yeah, maybe Thursday this week.
It's all just YAML. So
so yeah, Thursday maybe would be good this week or next week.
Okay. Great.
Cool. So yeah, if we can get this merged in as is, I think it's good to go. And then Eric and I'll meet and run through Electo, and we can update the this doc with the new voting method sometime between now and June 2nd when the election actually starts. Cool. So that's the most pressing issue in the election. The other thing, and I guess I'll give folks on the call some context. There's been a conversation at the TOC level about who's going to be running again and whatnot. So yeah, we're just about 1 year through this. From the way the election was set up, the initial election was the top 2 vote getters in the last election were on a 2-year term, and the next 3 were on a 1-year term. After this, every term is 2 years. But the first time it was set up that way to get a staggered thing going so that there'd be continuity every year. However, there was something that probably should have been thought of, is that the top 2 vote getters are both at VMware. So the way things were set up is that we'd have 2 people from VMware stay on and everyone else would switch. So that's not ideal. And another rule is that only 2 members of the TOC can be from any one organization. So right now we have 2 members from VMware, 2 from SAP, and we have Lee from gov.uk. And so that was kind of going to be a problem. However, David is going to be stepping down.
Yep, I'm stepping down to solve this problem. Partly because I'm not paying enough attention to the council and I wasn't sure I wanted to do it for more than a year. And partly because I really want to create an opportunity for VMware to have be part of the election and new people to feel like they can apply and create space for others. But we didn't want to turn over both people. So Eric has volunteered to be the one of us that stays on for another year. So my seat is up for grabs. And then we have to figure out what's reasonable in terms of the rules and whether an SAP person can be slotted into that second term, my seat, or not.
Right. So I'll briefly read what it says in the charter for TOC member resignations or removal. This is short. In the case where a TOC member resigns or is removed from the TOC by the governing board, the remaining members of the TOC will determine whether the vacant seat will either remain vacant until the next annual election cycle or will be filled using the results of the latest election. So essentially, if the TOC wants to, they can go to the results of the last election, go to the next vote getter. So in this case, that would be Jan. However, Jan has also stated that he is not going to be running for re-election. He's not going to continue on the TOC. The next person then would be Stephan. So folks at the TOC have proposed that we move Stephan then into David's 2-year term. Then we've got Eric and Stephan, who are both staying on the TOC, and then there'll be 3 open spots. And nicely, that's 1 person from VMware and 1 person from SAP, which means people from VMware and SAP and every other organization are eligible for this election and presumably in following elections. So I think that move, which is proposed, is completely within the realm of reason, given the way the charter is worded. I don't think we need to change the charter for the TOC to do that. The TOC does need to vote on that and say that that is what they want to do, if that is what they want to do. I think there are some things in the charter that could be clarified. And so like it does, the next annual election cycle, we might want to clarify as to whether or not that's when the term ends or at the next year in the middle, because I think we don't want we want to keep the cadence of 2 seats and 3 seats in each election. So there's some things that need to be clarified in the charter, but I don't think they need to be clarified in order for that to happen and this next election coming up to be run according to the rules. So I'll just leave it at that. If the TOC, someone at the TOC wants to propose this at this point, I think that would be fine to do. I will verbally mention all of this, that this is what's happening and this is how the TOC election is going to the governing board meeting, which is tomorrow. I do not foresee any objections, but I'll let everyone know that this is the plan if that is in fact what the TOC wants to do.
Do we need to wait for the governing board meeting before voting on it?
I don't think so. I think you can just vote on it, and if the governing board objects,
all right,
we'll take it back to TOC. I don't foresee that happening. Like I said, the way it's worded, or will be filled using the results of the latest election, I think is completely reasonable to then take the next highest vote getter and sliding them into the 2-year slot.
I think the only slightly ambiguous rule following thing is we're using that to fill one seat, but not the rest of the seats, which is probably fine, right?
Well, the rest of the seats are up. The 1-year election.
Yeah. So I think
exactly.
in terms of the order of operations, David, you would vacate the seat, let's say now, at which point now there's an open seat, and the remaining members of the TOC would vote about what to do with the vacancy.
Well, Jan has to also vacate his seat, and then we have to just, otherwise Jan gets my seat.
Well, no,
Jan just has to decline. Jan just
Yeah.
has to decline. Like Jan should be offered to be split into your 2-year slot, and then Jan can decline or accept it.
And if it would help, I could also step down before or right after David steps down. I guess we get that orchestrated, right? And
Yeah.
I somehow agree that this is now, it's kind of an exception, right? It's like, we do need to make sure that the governing board agrees to that move, and that we all agree to that move, and that we make it transparent that we kind of retro fixed a problem that we've introduced last year, right? By not setting up the rules for the very first election to make sure that this kind of continuity can be brought forward into the future. And if then every party, like the TOC and the governing board, agrees, and we do bring that up transparently to the community, which we kind of started by having this on record right now, right?
Yes.
This all sounds fine for me. I'm not sure if that's kind of officially, I don't think whether we should try to make this officially be in line with our rules, because the next annual election is actually happening, right? It's right in front of us.
It's an edge case that we found.
It's up to the
I guess it
TOC.
would be kind of the situation where I, as the community, would be somehow feeling like, why is the TOC decide now on that seat instead of just waiting that other week for just having another election, just because somebody stepped down? So I would just rule it openly that we want to change what we decided last year for a very particular reason. It's not for moving seats around, right? It's for fixing something that we had in the past. So I wouldn't look too much at how we can make this rule obliging, but rather we want to do that. If the governing board agrees that we want to do that, and we all agree that we want to do that, that should be fine.
Yeah, I think the language in the charter allows for this. The TOC has the option of waiting till the next annual election cycle or fill using the results of the latest election. So if you're going to fill using the results of the latest election, this is completely in line with that, and the TOC can decide that. So this also doesn't set any precedent, because there will never again be 1-year terms, right?
Yeah.
So there'll always be 2-year terms in the future.
I guess not necessarily, because we could be in a situation where someone steps down and we elect not to have someone fill a 2-year seat, and then then there's 3 other seats up for election. So in that case, there'd be 4 vacant seats for the election cycle. And so I think this is again where the charter is a little bit vague. It just says there should be 3 seats up in one cycle and 2 in the following cycle.
Right.
I think that language should ultimately get clarified to say there's 2 staggered classes of terms, ones that start and end in odd calendar years and ones that start and end in even calendar years.
I agree. And Eric, maybe you and I can draft those changes when we meet in the next 2 weeks, and we can put in a pull request, and then that'll have to be approved by the governing board.
Right. Yeah, because we just have a copy of the charter in the TOC repo, but
that doesn't have to happen before tomorrow.
Right.
Notify the TOC, and they can approve that later at the next meeting or something. But for future elections, I think it would be good to clarify a couple of things in the charter that could be clearer. Yeah.
Right. I think we can dodge that bullet through this term adjustment for this cycle, but then getting it really nailed down for the next one would be very helpful.
And I think that this doesn't have we don't need to have a vote on this right now. Although if you want approval from the governing, if you want to run by the governing board, maybe we do that. Also, I think David could step down at any given meeting. We could say David's going to step down, June 7th. I'm not sure what and then at that point, Stephan would move into his seat,
right?
Or something like that. I can't.
I'll leave that up
Someone
to
from the
you all.
TOC will have to propose that.
Right. Yeah. So this is my proposal. Like, this was sort of an idea I came up with. So I'm going to propose that, well, it's a little bit awkward because I'm stepping down. So maybe somebody should propose it who is remaining. But I'm informing you all that I am stepping down sometime before or concurrently with the next election. And you all get to decide. I'm open to any date as the end. I'd be happy to stay on up till the new term. But if it's easier from a rules perspective, we all feel better about it. If I step in earlier, just let me know.
But by the way, that would be an alternative. Maybe that doesn't require anyone to step down. We could just really say we want to fix the old situation. So you actually flip seats, and then it's actually your seat just expires. You don't step down. You just don't run for election.
Because that was just an arbitrary decision that Chip made for the 2021 election.
It sounds like the cleanest solution, right? It's what we intend, and now we now try to figure out how to somehow make this run with the existing rules and figure out how we comply to those existing rules. But we want to fix a problem, right? Let's just fix that problem. Maybe. And I guess if everyone agrees, that shouldn't be a problem, right? To fix that in retrospect.
So
maybe we should go for that.
Is the motion here then to propose that Stephan and David swap seats? Okay, so I'm going to propose that motion.
I second that motion.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I'm fine.
Should we have a vote
as well?
But I won't propose anything here because that sounds.
I'm in favor.
So that seems to be unanimous then.
That motion passes. Great. Stephan, you're now in a 2-year term. David, your term now expires at the end of this next election. Lovely. And I'll just inform the board that this is what's happened. I cannot imagine anyone will have a problem with that. So
And then maybe, Chris, you should put an announcement out as part of an election cycle saying what we did, if the board approves it, as long as the board doesn't,
Yes, I will mention that when I in the election communications, I will say who the people remaining on the board are and what seats are open. And that what this means is that only one person from VMware and one person from SAP will be eligible in this election cycle for a seat on the board. And then there'll be one other guaranteed wildcard.
On the TOC, right? Or
On the
board.
TOC. Yes, not the board, sorry.
Yeah. Oh,
and then I guess Jan and I deciding to run for re-election is really up to us in terms of our submitting candidacy anyway. So it's really
entirely up to you.
So whether until we do or don't submit.
Yep, you can run for re-election or not.
And we're at time, unfortunately. Which I believe there is another call that's just about to happen for the Karifi project, which is annoying. Greg, how do you fancy doing next week?
I can check my calendar, but I can probably do it.
Okay, if you want to just let us know via Slack and we'll just move that one along. And Ram, I did see that you've dropped some handy updates in there under any other business. Are they just for info or do we need to talk through any of them?
No, just click through the links and read through.
Awesome.
There's one suggestion I want to bring up right now is maybe from the next meeting on, we should actually have our guests speaking first.
Yeah,
that would be polite. Yes.
Like, I mean, maybe is there any urgent things, but other than that, our guests should be speaking first.
Yeah. Okay, cool. I will make that switch round in the agenda. All right.
All right.
Thank you very much, all.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a wonderful week.
See you. Bye.
See you. Bye.